Thank you very much. Because I've only got 15 minutes, I'm going to have to forgo the Canadian folk song I was going to sing. And Diana's, I'm going to speak very rapidly, so Diana's offered to translate for anyone who needs help. I got into this, or I became aware of food as an issue actually 50 years ago, and I'm painfully remembering that these days because it actually struck me. I was at a meeting of the Committee on World Food Security, which is the United Nations body that once a year comes together to tell each other how good they're doing in Rome. And it hit me then that it had been 50 years that I'd been involved in issues around, global issues around food. And it caused me to then reflect a little bit about, well, so what's that done? And where are we now? And I've got both good news and bad news, I guess. We're supposed to be a bit provocative here, so I'd like to be provocative and say that I don't believe that we in Canada or in the world in food have come to fully realize how serious climate change is going to be for us. I think we are underestimating how hard it's going to be. And then I want to be positive, because I really am, to say that, in fact, we can address the issues of the climate change, and we can, in fact, feed the world, and we can do it quickly. So I'm not pessimistic about what we can accomplish together. We can do it, but frankly, I think we're underestimating the challenges that we actually are facing today, patting yourselves perhaps in the back a bit too much sometimes. 50 years ago, two things happened that changed how I looked at the world. And I was in high school in those days. I think I was in grade 10. And I remember, that gives you an idea how old I am. And I remember very much one book by Rachel Carson, 50 years ago, Silent Spring, which totally shocked me that that was the kind of world that my food was being grown in and what it meant for us. And then a few months later, not long after Silent Spring, I watched one evening on television, trying to pretend to do my homework and watching the news, and saw that there was a World Food Congress being held. And this was the first ever global food congress at a political level. And at that Congress, President Kennedy, remember him, made a statement which stuck in my mind and has ever since then. I can say the speech pretty much in my sleep. But when I was 15 years old, that meant a lot. And he said, we have the means, we have the capacity to wipe hunger and poverty from the face of the earth in our lifetime. And I believed him. I thought, yeah, that should be possible. We should be able to do that. And the news from the World Food Congress then was that, in fact, half of the world, more or less, was hungry. So it was a huge challenge for us, but I believed it could be done. And then I was, a few days ago, in Rome at the Committee on World Food Security, and governments were congratulating each other on how much had been achieved since the last food conference, summit, a few years ago, and where they had committed themselves to not ending hunger in our lifetime, but cutting it down to half, sort of. Trying to make it a little bit better at least. In fact, at the very last meetings that they had, they're pretty much just saying to each other, well, let's just see what we can do. Maybe we'll try and do something. But they were saying that, in fact, they'd achieved a lot. That there are today, you'll be happy to know, only 868 million hungry people. That's only about 15% or so of the world's population. So it can look pretty good. But if you go on to read the small print in the report, besides the 868 million that are hungry, somehow, and that's just 15%, there seems to be 30% that seem to be nutrient deficit. They maybe had enough food, but they're not getting the right food, and so 26% of children under the age of 5, in fact, have stunted growth, mental and physical. 26% of our, more than one quarter of our population on this planet. In fact, overall, 30%. And then they go on to say, well, besides that, of course, we do have this little problem of too much food in some places. So even if you take out the hunger-induced or the poverty-induced overconsumption of calories, the obesity factor, take out the part caused by poverty and simply the part that's simply making us ill because we're eating too much, there's another billion people. So in fact, we're kind of back at where we were when I first came into this. About half the world is being damaged and brutalized by the food chain. Somehow, they're just not getting what they need from this system. And then we're going into a time period of incredible climate change. And while our governments were congratulating each other in Rome, some of the farmers' organizations I was working with there were saying, don't worry, we can take care of climate change. Well, you know, yes, if you were farming 3 million years ago, because what's happening to our planet we haven't seen for 3 million years. While we were sitting in Rome, we were being told that in the last 8 years, 40% of the mass of ice in the polar regions has disappeared in 8 years, 40%. And it will be gone entirely in another 8 or 10 years. We haven't seen those climatic conditions for 3 million years. We've only had agriculture for 12,000 years. So if we really think we're ready to address the changes we're about to be faced with, we're not. But we can be. Because we have some things going for us that we didn't have going for us before. One of them, of course, is that we know each other now. 50 years ago, civil society, all of us in social movements that were trying to work and do things about hunger, we didn't know each other. Didit Pellegrino, who works for Greenpeace on agriculture, was isolated. Now she knows Gigi Manicat, who works for Oxfam Novib in Holland, and they know Alberto Gomez, who was with UNORCA and the Via Campesina movement in Mexico. And they know the guys in the slow food movement in Italy, and they know the folks that are involved in Friends of the Earth, and they know the people involved in the CSAs around the world, and they all know Olivier de Schutter, and everyone's talking to each other. So in fact, for the first time in this current time, around the world, we're talking to each other in social movements, in NGOs, and everything else, and we can collaborate and organize and strategize. That's absolutely new. And it is absolutely global. And that gives me optimism. But also, I get optimism because of the creativity in the peasant movement. I mean, I don't know if there's a famous legend, which is actually a true story. This is not, it's a legend, but it's true, of a West African farmer, a woman named Panza. I don't know if she's from Guinea-Bissau or not, but somewhere in West Africa, who was enslaved in the 1690s and hid in her hair for the crossing, the terrible crossing to the New World, so-called New World, rice seed, West African rice seed in her hair. And when she got to Suriname and got off the boat and was put onto the plantation, she escaped almost immediately with the rice seed, and together with the other slaves who escaped, and there's a whole network of communities called the Maroons, all through that part of northeastern South America. They managed to create rice production in South America for the first time ever in the world. They did it in one season. In one season, because they had no choice but to make it work, they were able to take an African crop and grow it in South America. And it worked. It's still being grown there today. So the ability to move quickly, to make changes, to adjust our food system is there. And the networks are there. We can do this. I mean, look how fast things have changed during that whole time of the colonial period, that terrible colonial period still. Maize came from Central America and Brazil to Africa. In 3 generations, without even the telephone or the trains, much less tweets and blogs, in 3 generations, maize was being grown in every single part of Africa. Adapted by local farmers saying, hey, I can use this, I can change this, I can do plant breeding here, I can make this work for me. At the same time, sweet potatoes from Latin America went across to Asia. So in Papua New Guinea, with 600 different languages and cultures, in 1 generation it moved throughout all those languages and cultures, from the mangrove swamps to the mountaintops. They were able to grow sweet potatoes. And 2 famines were prevented in China because peasant agriculture in China adapted as well there. Very rapidly. Suddenly, in the course of literally a generation or 2 or 3 generations at most, peasant agriculture, not scientific researchers, were able to take food crops and livestock species and move them around to make... Am I out of time? No. Sorry. Okay, loose and livestock species, and make it work that we could diversify production and they could survive remarkable new conditions. That can be done today, and it has to be done today. We need to somehow get in and have peasant production around the world, and the rest of us working with them in the CSAs to stimulate that diversity and create that kind of exchange we've had before to survive climate change. And the industrial chain can't do it. Only the food web, led by farmers, can achieve that. And I want to give a few really boring factual examples. At this hour of the night, you're not supposed to give people facts and figures. I'm going to give you a couple of facts and figures, just to make the point. The industrial food chain has taken 7,000 crops that peasant agriculture has domesticated over the years, over the 12,000 years. They've taken the 7,000 crops and reduced that down to 150 crops. That's what they work with. In fact, they work with mainly 12 crops. About 2/3 of all agricultural research is on 12 crops. That narrowing of the food system makes it almost impossible for the industrial chain to adjust to climate change. They can't do it. Same time, they've taken the 40 livestock species domesticated by farmers around the world over the centuries and millennia, and reduced that down to 5 species, which is almost all of our production, forgetting the other 35 altogether. And we can't survive climate change with that kind of system. And they've made the cost of that system unbearable, so they can't shift the system fast enough. The average cost of developing a new genetically modified crop, one variety, is $136 million for one variety. Peasants do it all the time. It takes labor and genius and not much more. Long time. That's the system we need to have. Over the last, since John Candy made his speech, in fact, over those 50 years, the industrial system has bred for us and patented 80,000 different plant varieties, 59% of which actually happen to be flowers. During that same time period, of those same 50 years, peasant agriculture has bred and nurtured 2.1 million different plant varieties, food varieties. So if we're going to survive climate change, we need to create that kind of network, that kind of web of creativity among the consumers and the farmers together around the world. A lot's changed in the 50 years. We have the means now. We have the capacity, because we have Food Secure Canada. We can and we are making a food sovereign planet. That's what we can do. It's what we absolutely have to do. There's a lot of work to do. It's been 50 years. No one's leaving until we get it done. Kathleen's not going to leave. Diana's not going to leave. Eric's not going to leave. Brewster's not going to leave. Susie's not going to leave. Emma's not going to leave. We're going to get it done. We can do it. We have the genius and the creativity and the integrity to feed the hungry. Thank you.